Callard, and I'm the Chief Exec of the Global Sourcing Association. So for those of you that might not be familiar with the GSA, we are the industry association and professional body for strategic sourcing. And we look after the interests of both the buyers, the service providers, and those that provide support to both sides of all sides of the sourcing community. So one of the issues that we are mindful of is the difficulties for our service provider community in selling in a virtual environment. So we've partnered up with Durhamlane, and we've been running a trilogy of webinars on sales and sales performance. So this is the third and the final in the trilogy. So we've got the pre-recorded or the recorded webinars on selling on value was the first one. Looking at being productive and being productive in a virtual environment was the second one. And this third one is all focused on qualifying in your leads, or rather qualifying out your dud leads so that you can be most successful. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Luke Robinson, who is a sales performance consultant with Durhamlane. Can I ask that you post any questions you've got in the chat? We will be taking questions at the end, so please make it as interactive as possible. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Luke.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And just to double check, you guys can all see the screen, yes?
Yep.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, as mentioned, we are going to have a look at effective qualification, both accurately qualifying and also having the confidence to ruthlessly disqualify any deal or opportunity that's in your pipeline. So allowing you guys really to spend your time where you can be most successful. So just as we go through, as I say, this is session 3. We're going to have a look at selling at a higher level in terms of our proven methodology. Just a quick whistle stop tour through that, having a look at challenges for salespeople under the current climate, facing change in buyer behaviour, as well as Magic 35 qualification, and finishing off with some sales mantras for success. Okay, as mentioned, if you want to ask any questions or comment using the chat, that would be great. We can try and take them right throughout the actual session. Otherwise, I'll try and throw some questions towards you guys throughout. Otherwise, we can do it towards the end as well. The objective of the session this morning really is to challenge you guys to think, and to think a little bit differently, because far too often in the world of sales, we just spend our time doing. We're very busy individuals. We'll put our head down, we'll pedal away, we'll do the same things that we've always done. So hopefully what we can do is equip you with a very successful sales tool of ours. I would say that it's probably one of our most successful IP. That's been described as powerful in the past as well, because it works, okay? And it's very simple, and it makes complete sense from both the quantitative and qualitative side as well. Now, we're always looking to motivate, inspire, and energize you guys. It is a Friday morning. How are the energy levels out of 10?
About 1.
About 1, okay. The only way is up.
I tell you the reason why, because it's quite creative. We had a during lockdown we won a huge deal, and we had a contract celebration last night, a contract signing celebration.
Okay.
Which was done over Zoom. Very, very creative. Held by a distillery, and it was gin and whiskey tasting. So it was 1, but underneath that is a 9 out of 10 for motivation.
Right, okay. And do you find as well that you drink a lot more and a lot faster on Zoom?
I'll have to replay the recording.
Right, okay, no problem. And what we're looking to do is, again, increase your confidence when it comes to being in these sales situations, but ultimately what we're trying to do is increase your success, because that is what we're judged on at the end of the day. Just a quick little bit about us as well for people who don't know. We're Durhamlane. We're a sales performance organisation. We help people and organisations increase sales, profits, revenues, but in a sustainable way. The training side of the business, obviously, is what you guys are sat in right now. We work with a lot of both sales and non-sales people alike, based on our proven selling at a high level methodology, helping them to find strategies to win, sell, and even retain more clients. Typically, if you don't have a team for us to work with, what we can do is we can build you that sales operation with our recruitment side of things, whether it's fresh graduates out of university, first or second jobbers, all the way through to the more experienced hired sales director level. We can build you that sales operation. So the training and recruitment side of our business is the build. We have an outsourcing side of our business, which is the buy it side. And that's from outsourced marketing services through to a white-collar sales team as well, in terms of we have MQLs, so MQL generation, marketing qualified leads. And we have a team that will then take that on. Using this qualification process that we're going to be going through this morning, we'll then turn that into a sales qualified lead, and we'll pass that back over to our client, allowing them to spend their time where they can be most successful. Really become an extension of people's sales arms. So pretty much anywhere along the life cycle of your business, Durhamlane can help you out in terms of sales. So yeah, outsourcing, training, as well as recruitment. And a little bit about me as well before we do start, probably more important at the top, salesperson first, trainer second. I did used to spend my time going around and visiting businesses and doing speaking events, but now it's half an hour to up to 3 hours of me just screaming at a screen at home. But we're in the virtual world now, but I would consider myself a salesperson first and then trainer second. My career in sales and business development has spanned for about 14 or 15 years now as well, working and selling on behalf of micro SMEs through to national global blue chip clients, but really now concentrating on that sales consultancy, coaching and development side of things, and pushing that strategic and solution sell. Because we as an organization, we're extremely passionate about promoting sales as a profession. Now, I did this on last week's session as well, but there may be some new heads on this morning. But if I was to say the word salesperson, what is the first word that comes to mind?
Second-hand cars.
Second-hand cars.
Pushy.
Pushy.
Pause written energetic.
Right, okay.
Because I'm a salesperson.
And you know what? These are. It tends to be a negative connotation around who we are as people and what it is that we do. And people have an idea of what a salesperson is in their own head. But unfortunately, because of some bad salespeople, we do get a bit of a bad rep. But what we're trying to do as an organisation is just raise the bar of the sales profession through every one of these sessions that we do, or anybody who we ever work with and speak with. So that's the introductions out the way. I just wanted to get into the, I suppose, the meat of the content as well, and just touch on the changing world of sales and why qualification is so important based under this current climate as well. In terms of changing buyer behavior, 67% of the buyer's journey is now done digitally. Okay, so in terms of the research that people are doing, the content that we have available out there, and the human interaction side of what it is that we do in terms of our sales role, it's getting reduced more and more. But the time that we do actually have to be able to do that means that we need to be extremely effective in terms of our conversations and the things that we need to buy, or the things that we need to ask, sorry. And the bottom line really is, what do I need to know to make as quick and a higher value sale as possible? But what questions should I ask in order to get that information as quickly as possible as well? 57% of business to business buyers, they're finding their way to the buying decision before actively engaging with a vendor. So they've made up their mind before they're even willing to speak to you in terms of shortlisting these individuals. But the biggest telling stat for me are the final two when it comes to qualification. 10.2 people is the average size of a business to business buying group. And that's up from 5.4 in 2014. Okay, so that's 10.2 people. The 0.2 obviously is because of an average, but what we're finding is there are multiple different key stakeholders within organizations, different buyer types with different perspectives. We have groups within organizations that, before it even gets to a decision, will be bid on even no bid, right? So in terms of understanding how our organization is set up and what the buying process looks like on their end, but ultimately finding out role identification, it's absolutely key to be able to find our way through this. And, today's sales process now takes around 22% longer than it did 5 years ago. So in terms of understanding timescales and people's urgency to be able to do things and the problems that they're actually trying to solve, to work out whether, is it worth my time with this particular opportunity, or should I park it and go after something that is possibly going to be more successful? And the qualification process that we're going to have a look at will be able to help us refine that, and reduce the time spent on deals that aren't going to close. Because what that leads to in terms of challenges for salespeople is we spend around 24% of our time researching. So whether that's individuals, industries, companies that we're going after, it's just part and parcel of the game, right? There are lots of different sales enablement tools to help reduce that time, but it's just part of what we need to do. But the biggest telling stat for me is salespeople spend 50% of their time on deals that won't close. So that to me says they're running around kissing frogs, right? They're chasing imaginary revenue based on an exciting conversation that they had because somebody said they were interested. Okay, that equates to 3.2 times more time on deals that actually don't close. So having a qualification process to be able to accurately qualify or ruthlessly disqualify is absolutely key in allowing us to spend our time where we can be more successful. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Now, the actual
You
process.
do have a question, Luke. You do have a question, and that is, why do you think is the reason? What do you think is the reason why sales takes 22% longer today than 5 years ago?
It's probably because of the multi-layer buy-in functions as well within organizations. I think it was about 6.4 people or 6.8 people that are involved in an average business-to-business buy-in decision, and that was a couple of years ago. And now it's now 10.2. So I think it's the number of different hands that something needs to go through in order to be able to get to a decision. So if we can actually start from the top and work our way down and include these decision makers from the beginning, that helps reduce the time spent on actual deals and opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
So the selling at a higher level process, we've broken down a particular sales cycle into 5 defined phases. Okay, you've got front end, which is find and create, which is what we call the wheel of business development, and that should always be turning. You've also then got the most integral part of any single sales process. If you look at Miller Hyman, if you look at Sandler, if you look at selling at a higher level, question-based selling and qualification is absolutely key to understand whether the opportunity is mutually beneficial for both parties. And this define and understand phase is absolutely integral to understanding how far we can then move through the actual process or whether it's worth moving it through. This Magic 35 qualification toolkit is just as important here as it is here as well as here. And what's worth stressing as well is the toolkit that we're going to be going through is something that is built up over time. So from conversation 1, that's when we start commercially qualifying deals and opportunities. You're probably not likely to be able to get all of the information in call 1 or conversation 1, but it's something that we can then start building. And really, we can use the gaps within this qualification process for the next meeting to be able to fill those gaps and then build on that information as we go through. Because the issue is with a lot of organizations, those salespeople, in fact, they're great at this, right, in terms of trying to generate new business, but they miss out the most important part and jump into, let me tell you how great that we are, instead of actually understanding, what problem that you're trying to solve, what's the outside force that's driving you to change right now, how long has that been the case, and why now, in terms of checking the urgency, their timescales, has the prospect even confirmed that they need to change? So all these things really need to be considered when it comes to qualifying or accurately qualifying a deal. And this define and understand phase is really where Magic 35, it comes to life. Now, it's called Magic 35 because there are 7 different core criteria that for us need to be satisfied. You've probably used BANT or some sort of qualification framework in the past. They're probably very, very similar. They're not going to be chalk and cheese. I always say that it's mainly just 2 different types of cheese. But what they're reiterating is the importance of qualification. Now, one of the 7 is budget, okay, right? And each one of these 7 core criteria is scored from 0 to 5, okay? 0 being you didn't know anything about it, nor did you even ask, all the way through to, well, I'm scoring it out of 5. So if you put a gun to my head, I couldn't give you any more information on this particular core criteria. 7 different core criteria scored from 0 to 5. 7 times 5 is 35. Hence the name Magic 35, but first one is budget. The second is define need. So what problem are you actually trying to solve? The third is decision maker. The fourth is decision criteria. 5th, compelling event. 6th is time scales. And finally, we've got competition as well, okay? So by no means would these be asked in order. Obviously, you wouldn't start the budget conversation straight away when you're going through. But in terms of looking at some of these around that compelling event and what is the outside force that is driving the customer to change, we need to understand that. Because for me, that then creates urgency and we then find out what problem that they're solving. Are the likely benefits of what we can offer them now big enough to create a strong and compelling reason to change based on what's happening within their organization as well? Okay, so what I wanted to do is just run through them bit by bit. Now, and what I also encourage you guys to think about is don't really get bogged down with the score, okay? It's more so around the information that you get under each particular line item, okay? And what I will do is I'll show an example of the scoring system as well. But following this particular session, hopefully Abby will have distributed one of our editable PDFs for Magic 35. And I want you guys to take a deal that or live opportunity that you're currently working on, and I want you to then put it through this process once I've actually gone through and I've talked you through it as well. So let's just start at budget, right? Now, typically, most people seem to think, or when we say budget, we think of a figure, Okay, and it is very difficult, in certain industries as well to understand people's budget, because there's a lot of dancing around it, and they don't want to share it, or they don't think it's viable at this particular stage. But there are some great questions, or very general questions, that you can ask very early on in the conversation, and just really understand. Listen, historically, how have projects like this been funded within your organisation? What does the buy-in process maybe look like on your end? Who needs to be involved in saying yes, or within the buy-in process? And right now, I mean, how important is price to your overall decision? Even for the project that we're discussing, what sort of budget do you have in place? Or has there even been a budget put aside? These are questions that very early on you can ask without actually saying, well, how much is available? Okay, so there are little things that you can get a good idea of how things are bought, how they spend, and who needs to be involved, and what the process might look like. That does feed into budget. However, the further that we then go through the actual process, we then need to dig a little bit deeper. So where does that budget sit? Is it departmental, or is it distributed right out at the start of the year? Which, incidentally, you can then check, well, when is your financial year end? Well, it's in another 2 months, so we're out of money, but it will be reassigned going forward in 2 or 3 months. So then I can maybe have a look at my time scale and think, okay, I might be able to add another 3 or 4 months on top of my time scale because of that. We find out who the budget sits with as well. For me, if you find out who the budget sits with, you're probably going to start actually finding out one of, if not the decision maker, and start ticking off this criteria as well. Then we can then get a little bit further in terms of, well, how much is available? Now, it's a really difficult question to ask that, because lots of people will say, well, listen, if I tell you I've got £15,000, all of a sudden you're going to come in at 14,995, right? But there needs to be a certain amount of honesty, and if you spent enough of your time actually understanding what problem that they're trying to solve, it's a case of, listen, you told me this is the problem that you've got, right? We now understand that this is the right project in terms of a training program that is going to get you where you need to be. So I need to understand the program that you need fits with inside of the budget that you have available, but also what sort of flexibility that you have and where else you might be able to get the money from should this need be as defined as you say it is. So if I was to get very positive answers, or even answers from a lot of what I've just gone through in terms of budget, I would possibly score that a 5 out of 5, right? But it's sometimes so difficult, and it's like getting blood out of a stone for some people, and there's that sort of secret air around it. But there needs to be, an element of honesty with it as well, and you need to really judge it. Now, I think that you can probably start talking about budget if there is something that has happened within their organisation. They're trying to solve a problem, and they're working towards a particular time scale. That says to me that they're probably looking to spend some money, right? Or they're looking to make a change. So I may be well within our rights to start entering the budget conversation as well. Now, the actual defined need, as we say, is usually driven by the compelling event. And the difference between the two, let's say, I don't know, a factory worker loses their fingers. That would be the compelling event. The actual defined need would be, well, we need a health and safety process to stop that happening again. We need to actually understand whether the prospects confirm that they need to change. We'll find that the biggest competitor that we'll ever face as salespeople is people's willingness to change. The stats say that only 9% of people will go and use a direct competitor. Only 14% of people will take their services elsewhere, even if they're dissatisfied with your service, right? So the biggest competitor usually isn't your competitor. Your biggest competitor is managing that change. And are the likely benefits of what it is that you're offering or your organisation offers big enough to then create a need within their organisation? We'll move through again. Decision makers, right? Who is it? We need to find out. Where it says, are you sure? That's not something that you would ask them, right? But it's something that you've really got to ask yourself. Am I dealing with the right person here? I always just ask the question, listen, if we were to go ahead with this, who ultimately would sign something like this off? Or if you believe that you might be stepping above that person, you could ask the question, who other than yourself needs to be involved in helping come to a decision for a project this size? Something like that. Now, even if we get the answer, well, it would be my managing director or it would be my CEO. We then need to explore a little further around, well, what's important to your CEO? How involved are they going to be in this whole process? Well, they're involved when it's, when we come to a decision, right? Well, how is a decision made in your organization? Well, it goes to board. Well, how often is a board meeting within your business? Well, it's once every month. Okay, how often does it take something to get raised to the agenda for that particular board meeting? 2 months. So now I can board 3 months on the end of my time scale just to get a decision, which might not be the right one. which reiterates again the importance of dealing with these key decision makers from the beginning. The decision criteria for me is where a lot of people fall down within their deals or their opportunities, because they never really checked exactly what it is that the customer wanted to see. So what is it that we need to prove? You know, what are the 3 most important things that I need to have shown you by the end of this demonstration? You know, what is it that your current provider is not giving you that we'd love to be able to see? You know, we need to double check and keep confirming throughout the cycle. Who else do you want to be speaking to? What are the case studies and projects, and customers do you need to speak to in order for us to prove what it is that, for you to be able to say yes? We've got to understand exactly what it is that they need to see, so we're showing them the right things and not just showing them the things that we think they need to be able to see. The compelling event, as I say, we've been through that as well, but timescales. The most frustrating part for me of sales. That's why the second question is right, okay, you want it then, what happens next? But what control do you have over that time scale? Okay. I remember doing a piece of business for Durhamlane, and I spoke to this guy at an event. He said, listen, Luke, I need to speak to you about your outsourced business development services. We've tried it. We're just useless. We need somebody who's doing it for us. And he said, listen, I've got 18K to spend with you. I thought, fantastic, right? He's already told me his budget. He's already told me the figure. We can get that sorted. Now, I'd really forecasted that to land in around the end of October in a calendar year, right? But he went to his accountant and to ask for the money. His accountant then said, Ian, you can get 50% of this funded. So Ian's thinking, okay, well, I only have to pay half. So he then had to go find a funding company. He then had to get accepted for the funding. We then had to jump through all of the necessary hoops and paperwork, as did we. Then Christmas happened, right? Then we came back in the new year. But he didn't. He went away on holiday. We did eventually get it over the line, but what I then forecasted for the end of October then landed at the end of January. So for me, there is always something that you can find out. So that's why we need to be checking progress regularly with people and leaving actions. Because for me, helping people to close or helping people to buy is all about maintaining momentum. Yeah, because it always seems to slow down when you're getting to that particular stage. So in terms of timescales, understand what they are, realistically, what control they have over that. Yeah, and how close we might get to actually hitting that time scale. And then competition. Yes, we need to understand who else somebody might be speaking to or who they're currently using or who they might have considered. But it's not just other suppliers. What you'll find massively is it can be the cost of change. The biggest competition that you usually face comes internally within the organization that you're trying to get into. It could be an FD who has short arms and even deeper pockets. It could be an IT director. If you're a software and technology business, you're trying to get your function, your software, you're trying to get it in with their business, but you're trying to kick out the system that the IT director had a huge part in implementing. So you're essentially going in there and calling their baby ugly, right? Or, I've come up against it before. We've got sales directors who have a background in training and they believe they can do it better than I can, all right? So you always need to understand what are the roadblocks that I might face. What is the biggest competition internally that'll stop us getting our services in there as well? Or it could just be, well, listen, the current method's okay for now. We've always done it this way. We'll change when we need to. It seems like too much as we go through. So top to bottom, you've got 7 different core criteria. There are lots of different questions that sit within inside each one of those, obviously, as we've gone through. But just at first glance, how would that work for you guys? Could you see this working for you?
Yeah, I think that's a good set of criteria, isn't it? Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So really what we then do, and we score it based on the information that we've got, all the way from 0 to 5. So let's say competition 0, no consideration given to competition, nor are the reasons for no sale, right? But then you've got number 3, where reasons for no sale discussed with customer at a high level, so we understand what might stop us, but we don't know whether we're yet going to be stopped. So it's basically all around building that piece of information, but questioning and qualification go hand in hand. So really what you need to do is use qualifications to help you ask great questions. What that does is it gives you a structure to be able to think about the questions that you ask. But at the same time, you need to ask great questions to help you accurately qualify. Now, as the handout here, right, this is what you've got. And that's what's been distributed for you guys. What I want you to do is really just go through a deal that you've got in your pipeline, right? one that you think, you know what, it's ready to go. Let me put it through the qualification process and just really find out where the gaps are. Because if there are any gaps, your next call should be to the customer to then actually fill those in. Okay. And in terms of our sales mantras as well, there are a number of different ones here, but really I just wanted to draw your eyes to here. Estimate, then validate, never assume. Never assume just because a business is cash rich that they have the budget available. Do they actually want to spend it with you, and has it been put aside for a project like this one? Okay, so we need to really spend our time understanding and using this qualification process to be able to do that. And listen, when you're going into opportunities or when you're going into next meetings, if you've had already a conversation and you've built that and you've qualified it, the next time you then go in, right, look as when preparation meets opportunity. The more prep that you do going into these things and finding out and filling in these things, I guarantee the next time an opportunity comes along, you'll be an awful lot luckier. All right. So sales is the lifeblood of absolutely every organization. In terms of driving things forward, nothing moves without it, right? But unless we've got a defined sales process or a structure, right, it's no good. We've got to be able to follow process. We've got to be able to, manage our pipeline. This is great for pipeline visibility, right? I always tell sales directors alike to actually run a Magic 35 clinic for every deal that's in the pipeline. I guarantee that you'll get rid of 50% of it. Yeah. So it's so important that, yes, we drive it forward, but we have a process and a structure to be able to follow and do that. Okay. So again, whistle stop tour. These are only half an hour. We've gone through it. You've got the handout. I'd encourage you guys to give it a go. But obviously, I want to take any questions that we've got as well from the chat.
Okay, thanks ever so much, Luke. If people are willing to come off mute and put a hand up, that might be the easiest way to facilitate conversation. But yeah, I've got a whole host of questions I could ask, but this shouldn't be a sort of a therapy session for me and my sales process. So, but I'm willing to start if needs be.
Got Sarah put a hand up there, yeah.
Hi, just a quick question. When you mentioned the internal roadblocks,
yeah,
how do you best deal with those early on? Because I've got one at the moment, and there's a certain department that has their own internal politics, which is kind of stopping the project somewhat. So I just wondered how, because I've tried to think of lots of different ways to try and get around that, but it hasn't really worked because they're quite set in what they want. So it becomes an argument internally within the company.
Yeah, and there's a lot of internal arguments go on within organisations. But I always say, listen, it could be called a coach, a sponsor. I've even heard them called cheerleaders as well. But what I'd always encourage you to do is identify coaches continually in all of your accounts and your opportunities. So somebody really who wants you to win, but will also benefit from your success. Because these coaches have an intuitive sense of what will work with key stakeholders inside of an organisation. But also they'll give you an inside track to individuals and, who's got more power, this, that, and the other. So it's always really good to find an internal sponsor or coach to be able to help get around that. Otherwise, there's a case of you can then maybe go above that. But again, you don't want to step on anybody's toes to be able to do it. So you just have to be sensitive and understand really who is on your side and how can you both then best influence the internal argument that goes on.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ilko, sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly.
It's actually quite right. So no worries. Yeah. So what I'm thinking, so we have all these qualifications, right? Which I think is really great framework. But how do you go about so when you don't have everything at the 5, then how do you balance, like, what's the limit where you say, okay, what's the threshold that you need to get, right? So you say, okay, don't even try. And what's the threshold to say, like, okay, well, maybe we need to get this one a little bit clearer? Like how to...
Yeah, I'd love to be able to give you a threshold number as well, to say that, listen, if it's 25 out of 35, it's going to go. But unfortunately, I think it's just case by case. But again, those important ones for me in terms of, right, what problem are they actually trying to solve? Is something driving the change? And do they have a particular time scale in mind? That for me says, they're trying to make things happen. So it's probably worth your time. But yeah, if somebody says, well, you know what, it seems like a great idea, but we don't have any money until a year. then you'd be like, right, okay, brilliant, I'll get back in touch with you. So yeah, I just think those around timescale, compelling events, and actual defined need, those three are the most important, which lets you know whether it's or how urgent it is. Then from then on, you can then qualify it further yourself in terms of asking the right questions. But listen, budget is a sensitive subject for everybody, but nothing gets bought unless anybody's got any money, right? So if it's not there, then it ain't going to happen. Okay, so I would say concentrate on those three, and if they're scoring high, then further qualify.
I mean, that's a good point. You talked about the methodology and the structure around it. We can follow your methodology and keep working with things that aren't going to come through. It's having that tough decision point, or having the governance that somebody else is your manager and challenges you as to, is this the point to step off? Yeah.
So I like, for instance, I've got a forecasting meeting at 12 today where everything gets challenged. And we need one of these attached to each opportunity as well. So we've got full visibility on it.
Mm.
And challenge, I'd challenge yourself, because I just think, is it really is it really worth my time? And you know what, you get these great relationships with people, but yeah, commercially, if you look at it using Magic 35, sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
Okay, do you have any other questions or comments from the floor? I've got a very basic one, and that is that we've stopped using Salesforce and are looking for a different solution. Any recommendations for something that's not quite so unwieldy and pricey?
HubSpot. We use HubSpot CRM, sales and marketing, and as a technically challenged person, let's say, and user experience and being user friendly, it's very easy to follow. And it's very easily personalized as well. So for instance, when I talk you through the selling at a high level process, find and create, define and understand, propose, recommend, represent, close out and serve and grow, each one of our deals and opportunities is put in the pipeline against that particular phase. So, we might have, well, it's at close out. It's been at close out for 3 weeks, Luke. What's happening? What help do you need? Is this realistically going to happen? So we have them at different phases. And then, as I say, you can attach Magic 35s to each one, or you can make the notes section in Magic 35, right? You can break it up to 7 different core criteria, and that's where you'd leave your notes. So yeah, there are ways around it, but I would personally recommend HubSpot.
Okay, thank you for that. Good. Right. Any other questions for Luke, or should we wrap it up? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you for that. Abby, if you haven't already, please do distribute the PDF. In fact, if we could actually send the PDF from the last couple of events as well, and then everyone's got the full deck that they could actually refer to. So good positive feedback on the chat there, Luke. Thank you very much for that. Great whistle stop tour. And yeah, thank you for the whole trilogy. So thanks guys for joining. Have fabulous Fridays. All right.
See you later, guys.
Luke.
Thank you.
Bye.
Kerry.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.